Hi everyone! Oh, how I adored Spider-Man 3 as a kid. That time it was the best thing I have ever seen. Every time I watched it, I just enjoyed it. There was no thought in my mind that something could be wrong with it. For me, Spider-Man 3 was an equivocal masterpiece and a benchmark for the quality of superhero movies and film industry in general. But as the years went by, I learned more and more about how to write stories and what is a good script, worked out to the smallest details, and what is just a shoddy script in many places, overcrowded with a bunch of storylines and a frankly bad plot. What a disappointment it was for me, a kid who grew up watching Raimi's movies and loved the prequel with all my heart, to realize that the prequel was the worst of the entire trilogy and all Spider-Man films in general. Now, in 2023, watching it again, I realized the scale of the problem. The film is overloaded with some completely meaningless storylines. Characters are not fully revealed, the motivation of some characters is poor and unclear, and most importantly, Venom. Why is the coolest and one of the best enemies of Parker shown for only 10 minutes, 70% of which I see not Venom but Topher Grace's face? Why? I think I know the answer. Sam Raimi simply didn't want him to appear in the movie. Initially, Eddie Brock was not supposed to be in the movie at all. It was only because of the greed of the studio bosses that he ended up there. After all, they wanted to sell as much merchandise as possible for the movie, thereby making a lot of money. The more impressive the characters are, the more stuff you can produce. Although I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is still worse. After all, Spider-Man 3 has ideas that the creators somehow promote throughout the movie, and in TSM2 it just ended up being a mishmash of storylines. However, could the main problem with the Spider-Man 3 be just in its deleted scenes? We all know how different a movie can turn out if only the studio with its greedy bosses obsessively interferes with its creation, just like happened to Justice League. This did not pass by Raimi's pictures. Since the release of Spider-Man 3, we have been periodically fed various cutouts, remote scenes, photos from their shoots, and various early character designs. In this case, I suggest you to take a look at them right now. Let's go!
I swear to you, you won't stop me again.
The scene with the Sandman's daughter and the subsequent union with Venom. I just have one question. Why? Why was it deleted? Right after Flint got out of the sewers and turned back into a human, he visited his daughter in the form of a sand castle, and then he would say a very important phrase.
I swear to you, you won't stop me again.
After all, it was for this reason that he later formed an alliance with Venom, and it's much more logical than what was going on in the movie. As Marco was sitting in some corner, Topher Grace came to him in a Venom suit and offered to kill the Spidey. Of course, he couldn't refuse such an offer. That's it. Dude, you have seen him for the first time in your life. Why are you doing this? And immediately after the scene with the daughter, there was a dialogue between Eddie and Flint, in which Brock explains that it was Spider-Man who was preventing him from getting money for his daughter's treatment. In this entire moment, Sandman's motivation for forming an alliance is quite clear, and it doesn't look ridiculous. Spider-Man 3 lost a lot without these scenes. Let's move on. An alternative scene of Harry's transition to the light side. After refusing to help Peter against Venom and Flint, he picks up an old broken photo of him with Parker and MJ and starts to think. In fact, this version of Harry's transition is simply better than what we were shown in the theatrical version. The butler wouldn't appear from nowhere and suddenly start telling the real reason for Norman's death. Harry decided himself to help Peter because he was Harry's best friend, and it was an adult, balanced decision, and the conflict that had been developing throughout the trilogy was coming to an end. But in this case, he still thought that it was Peter who killed his father, so there is a great solution in a situation like this. Just leave these two scenes in the movie, that way everything will be harmonious and with no questions. Another important deleted scene was the breakup of Gwen and Eddie. As soon as Brock was fired from the Bugle, he came to Gwen's house for support, but she chased him away and said that she never wanted Eddie in her life again. Unfortunately, this scene never appeared on the internet. There is only one photo from the shoot. Actually, it would be a great motivation for Eddie to hate Peter even more. After all, on the same day he saw them together with a Gwen on a date. After such scenes, you feel sympathy for Eddie. So many bad things in one day. In general, filmmakers shouldn't have cut that. a cure for Sandman's daughter. After Flint gained his powers, he visited Dr. Wallace, a biologist who worked on the treatment of Marco's daughter. I have no idea why Dr. Wallace's storyline was completely removed from the movie. The storyline with the Sandman would have been much more interesting and logical. In this case, it becomes clear where all the money Flint looted would have gone. Peter's attempts to tell Harry the truth about his father's death. In the Spider-Man 3, Parker just gave up on it. They had only one horrible dialogue afterwards.
I need to talk to you. Explain things.
Tell it to my father. Raise him from the dead.
I'm your friend, Harry. I cared about your father.
And in the deleted scene, Peter tried to talk to Harry, but nobody just let him. At the very beginning of the movie, he came to Oscorp and wanted to finally talk to Osborn, but the security guards wouldn't let him in. Then Parker was kicked out of the building. There is only one shot from the filming, which shows a guy in a cap and someone's hand. In general, quite a lot of material was not shared online, so you can only look at some random footage from the filming. I hope that someday Sony will publish the whole deleted content. Well, for now we can only dream about it. Right here, I decided to make one scene out of several, since a whole sequence of events was cut out. When Marco's wife Emma and their daughter Penny saw the news that was happening, they decided to stop Flint together. Just to remind, in the previous scene with the Sand Castle, Penny learned that the Sandman is her father. At this time, Dr. Phil Wallace, who was developing a cure for Penny, was already watching the final battle between Spidey and the villains, where Wallace met Captain Stacy and Gwen. He told them that he knew who the Sandman really is. Meanwhile, Emma and her daughter arrived. Then they had a dialogue with the doctor himself, and unfortunately I don't actually know what exactly they were talking about. But after Spider-Man destroyed the symbiote, Flint would start beating him up, and immediately Phil Wallace, Emma and Penny would come in. Doctor said to Marco that his daughter was terminally ill and could not be saved, and she begged her father to stop beating Peter. In general, I like this ending more than the original one, because in this version of the scene, after the defeat of Venom, Flint didn't just stop fighting Spider-Man for some reason. After all, he swore to his daughter that Peter would never stop him from getting money for treatment again. Plus, there is pretty good action scenes, with new transformation of Sandman's body. It looks really cool. In this case, the whole storyline with Dr. Wallace was cut out to no purpose. That way, the whole storyline with Flint Marco had been expanded, and he would have had a clear goal, a certain amount of money to finance the development of a cure. By the way, for those who don't understand how the little girl, her mother and the doctor climbed onto the roof of the high-rise, I will show you.
Impossible.
And while you are in a state of shock, Harry Osborn is slowly going crazy. Before he inhaled the goblin gas, he had a dialogue with the butler, but as it turned out later, Harry was talking to the wall. Then Norman came to him in hallucinations and tried to turn his son against Spider-Man. Harry told Norman that Peter was his best friend and he will never hurt him, but the goblin convinced his son otherwise. And in the end, they hugged each other. Filmmakers shouldn't have cut this, because Harry's last dialogue with his father was in Spider-Man 2, which ended with their quarrel. Here, father and son make peace. After that, Goblin Jr. is finally born. We were also shown Harry's gradual loss of sanity, that occurred even without green gas. And now just imagine how Osborn's decision to help Peter would have turned out from the alternative scene I have already mentioned. Oh, what a masterpiece we have just lost. Well, that was all the most important deleted scenes. Next ones will be some interesting but less important scenes for the story. As we all remember, the symbiote spent a lot of time in Peter's room. I have no idea what it was doing, probably waiting for its turn in the storyline. In one of the removed scenes, they showed the confrontation between the actual spider and Venom in Peter's room, where the symbiote won and seemed to be eating the spider. Symbolically, it was a hint for the future struggle between Parker's light side, the spider, and his dark side, the Bully Maguire. I mean the Black Spider-Man, a brutal killer who takes lives and then talks about it with a smile on his face. And he can dance, why not? Creators needn't really have cut that one. However, if you don't remove just one of the previous scenes, it won't function as intended. Essentially, we barely witnessed the clash between Peter's good and evil sides. The dance scene doesn't count. Though there were other excerpts with the Parker's clash. They were also cut out, by the way. You all already know the screamer moment. Generally, there was no real need to take it out of the movie. I'm sure it would have left a great imprint on the memory of the children of that time. Before breaking up with MJ, Parker was tempted to put on the symbiote. He looked at the box where the black suit was lying, as if calling to him. It made it clear that the costume was like a drug, and that you couldn't do without it over time. Again, it's unclear why filmmakers removed it. The scene is quite small, but still important. In fact, it's just an extended version of another scene. It takes only a few seconds. I'm really curious to look at the person who deleted it. I mean, someone thinks that this
How you doing?
is more important than all these scenes? I think I will be asking myself such questions for a very long time. It's also worth mentioning the extended fights with Sandman. During their first meeting, Spider-Man was saving a child from the sandstorm, and there were a couple of additional action shots. There are photos from the other filming of scenes as well. For example, where a small child ran up to Peter in a Spider-Man costume and shot him with a toy web shooter. Then Parker shot the kid back with a real spider web. Additionally, there were a couple of more violent parts of the fight between Spider-Man and Sandman, where Peter hits him with some rebar and punches hard in the face. Then it turned out we were supposed to see Flint Marko mastering his new powers. This was not shown in the movie at all. I think most of you have heard at least something about the darker ending of the final battle. Spider-Man pulled Eddie Brock's skeleton out of Venom. After that, the symbiote attacked the Spidey and began to tear him apart, but Peter managed to escape and blow up the villain forever. Basically, it's clear why it was removed. The Spider-Man 3 has received a PG-13 rating, and such film excerpts simply cannot be in the movie. The studio also filmed Spider-Man web-swinging moments in a black suit, and since there are so few of them in the movie, they should have left them in. Besides, there is an alternative version of the fight between Harry and Peter, in which Parker is not standing but lying down. In fact, he thought that Osborn had lied to him and he was not MJ's new boyfriend. So the question is, why did you come here, Parker, if it's a trick for you? In this case, it's a good that scene never appeared in the prequel. While right now I'm just going to start listing the rest of the deleted scenes, because everything you will hear doesn't affect anything at all. Additional shots of Flint turning into the Sandman, extended scene of Peter getting the black suit, and then the red suit in the reflection of the glass, even though it was black. When Mary Jane breaks up with Parker, there was a moment when Harry evilly smiles. In the Daily Bugle, after Brock was fired, Jameson said that he hadn't issued a retraction in 20 years. In fact, this is not true. The Daily Bugle consistently published retractions, as Betty Brant said in her remote dialogue with Jonah. When Eddie Brock came to church, he repented and said that he was tired of suffering because of the mistakes of others. Furthermore, there were some weird dialogues between MJ and Harry at his house as well, where she apologized for something. There is a moment in the trailers that was cut from the movie for some reason. During Gwen's kiss with Spider-Man, Eddie has been here and saw it all. You can see from his face that Brock was very surprised. And finally, this scene was not even filmed, but still, at the end of the movie, it was supposed to be a final web-swinging scene. It seems to me that it was the right choice to cut it out. Just imagine that after the funeral of his best friend, Peter was flying around the city and screaming. It would be completely inappropriate. By the way, this photo shows how Spider-Man's black suit was originally supposed to look like. Actually, it's not bad. I just wanna see it in full. You know, after discovering all deleted scenes of Spider-Man 3, I feel like I watched literally another movie, which in turn is much better than theatrical version. But you are my dear viewers, click on the like button, subscribe to the channel and write what you think about it in the comments below. We'll see you soon.